Welcome to the Log Time Podcast. Living up to our name, we're finally coming around to talking about Welcome to the N.H.K, a show whose reputation definitely precedes it. The show's heavy and does a great job of realistically depicting issues of mental illness. It's a really interesting anime, so let's talk about it.
Over the years, I've heard so many things about Welcome to the N.H.K, and I'm astonished that in the amount of time that I have known about this anime, I had absolutely nothing spoiled for me. All I ever heard was that this show was an absolute fucking nightmare, that it was a train wreck from start to finish.
Yeah,
and
that's all I ever heard about it, but no specifics whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's
one of those...
I was just gonna say it's the same for me, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those great mysteries, like, I've somehow gotten this far without knowing anything about, like, Trigun or, like, any of the original Gundam series, like, these pillars of anime,
Yeah.
and I know fuck all about them and have somehow avoided any and all spoilers. So I was delighted when the same thing was the case for Welcome to the N.H.K, because I don't know what I really expected going into this, but Jesus fucking Christ, it was not what I actually got from this show.
I actually was not happy that nothing was spoiled for me.
You wish you knew where it was going?
I wish I knew at least something, because for the first 10 episodes, fuck all is happening, and I'm like playing 4D chess in my mind, like, fuck, when's it gonna drop? When's that real fucked up train gonna go?
Like, oh my gosh.
Like, yeah, he's in a state of depression and hallucinating and that, and there's paranoia, but I'm just like, but this is nowhere near what I've heard about the show, so when is that other shoe gonna fall?
Well, since we're talking about this, like, I want to tell you about my experience I had with this show, because I feel like that's kind of integral to what happened in terms of, like, just getting an idea of what the show is.
Yeah, go for it. Take the floor, baby.
So, like, when I started the show, I'd heard those things about N.H.K that was like, oh, you know, like, man, it goes places. And I was, you know, like, okay, that's really ambiguous and scary. So I started watching it, and the first 4 episodes I was okay. I was like, okay, well, this is definitely not your normal anime. And then, I don't know what it was, but about episode, I would say 7 or 8, I got, like, this feeling of dread. Like, and it's kind of weird, because the way I felt it was like, it wasn't like all at once, like I'm like, oh god, something bad's gonna happen. It was like building, like a building sense of dread. Like, oh my gosh, like something really bad's going to happen eventually, and I don't know if it's going to be in the show. I don't know if it's just a feeling that the show is giving me. I don't know if, like,
Matt,
I don't know. What?
To tell you how much I was playing, like, fucking cranium obstacle course with this show, up until Misaki actually gets hugged by Sato's mom, one of my conspiracy theories was, like, she's not real. She's just a manifestation of his mind.
Oh my god.
That was the thought that ran through my mind initially, too. And I had to go through a lot of different things like, oh, wait, but she's actually talked to people before. And then I was like, well, but actually, I mean, to be fair, though, Sato's, like, literally hallucinated. So,
right,
like, he's an unreliable narrator. So from this whole thing could be, like, a, you know, weird sort of hallucination in his own mind. Yeah. So maybe she's not real at all, and maybe he's not actually interacting with all these people, and maybe he's losing his fucking mind.
Like, initially, instead of just seeing him as paranoid and depressed, I actually kind of thought that he was like a paranoid schizophrenic. And so I was like, literally any of these characters are up for grabs then. Like, any of them could be fake.
Yeah.
I was like, this is uncomfortable. This show needs to do something.
I tried not to play that game in my mind anymore, because every time I do it, I'm wrong. And it just makes me overthink everything, and then I get upset. So I don't do that, because so I was just kind of letting the show take me for a ride, and the ride it was giving me was not pleasant. I think at one point I got physically ill and had to like take a break from the show for like a week.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I cannot watch this right now because I don't know what's going on.
Do you happen to remember like when that hit you exactly? What was happening?
Oh, it was probably around like episode 9 or 10. I don't know what was happening. I think it was we were building up to that like off meeting arc.
Yeah, that was the introduction.
God, yep, that would have done it.
Of adult Hitomi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were hitting that section, there wasn't any particular triggers for it or anything. Like, for me, it was just, like, things were happening, and I was just like, this is a lot.
I mean, I don't know, right out of the gate, we saw her fake a suicide story, and then she has, like, 16 pills that she's taken per day, and so, like, I was like, red flags, something's up. What's going on?
This show is filled with red flags everywhere.
Oh, yeah. This whole show is a red flag.
Yeah.
The show is a red flag where you try to go and see if you can get a not red flag at some point.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's the Super Mario minigame where the Shy Guy has a red and white flag and he raises it and you have to
Oh god.
And you have to guess which one, but it's
Left
just
or right.
red. It's just red every single time.
They're both red.
Yeah.
It's Minesweeper, but they're all mines.
And and sometimes he raises the white flag a little bit and he's like, oh nope, it's actually still red.
He like turns the white flag around and it's red on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt, to just piggyback off of what you were saying earlier, this whole show just permeates this sense of dread. And, it's astonishing how it's able to do it. Because, I mean, like, from the start, you already kind of, in some way, feel for Sato. Because, he's like a 22-year-old hikikomori who dropped out of college because he was... kind of always antisocial, but then, he stepped out one day and just thought everyone was, laughing at him and making fun of him and everything else. And then that sets a really bad precedent. But, you just continue to go further and further down that hole. And it's like, oh my God, this gets worse. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, this gets worse. Oh my God, this gets worse. And it's just like, how fucked up are you? What happened to you, man? And that's the thing, at some point, I had to stop overthinking things because they literally talked about, you start overthinking things and then you think up of 1,000 different possibilities in your mind and it just drives you crazy. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm being called out right now by this fucking show.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of times where I wouldn't say that I, empathize with Sato, but I get it, right?
Yeah.
Being able to get yourself in that mindset and just being able to relate to it is pretty on point.
Yeah.
I would say on some level, I was able to empathize with Sato because I've almost been there before. I've been at some pretty low points before, and I'm not, happy to say that necessarily, but I can understand how easily it can be to slip into something like that, to that kind of mindset. Maybe not to that degree of insane, just dreadful paranoia. I can't attest to that. But I get it. Like you say,
some of the symptoms and I say symptoms, but that's not really the right word. But some of the attributes, I should say.
Yeah.
The attributes have been shared before. So
yeah. But it's astonishing how it is written in such a way that you can empathize with parts of Sato, but also he's still unequivocally an absolute shit that needs to get his shit together.
Yeah.
And I was just really surprised by how well the show kind of walked that divide there and was able to get both things. Because I've encountered a lot of characters like Sato in different series like that, but I think Welcome to the N.H.K. has done probably the most faithful and empathetic and, dare I say, realistic portrayals of mental illness and how it can really affect a person's ability to function properly in a sense like that.
Yeah, that was the like biggest thing about this, is just every single character is suffering from something or other, and it's just the blind leading the blind, and no one's actually getting the medical attention that they need. That was like every single character in this show, and it's like I kind of hated the show for it, because I was just screaming. I was like, please go see a therapist. Please, at least one of you go see a therapist. But but no, yeah, like I think the way that it shows off various different aspects of somebody that's dealing with some type of mental illness is very realistic.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't ever feel like preachy or kind of like after school special sort of thing.
No.
Like, it's not trying to put them up as some sort of like thing to be pitied necessarily. It's like, this is the reality of the situation, and life is not always going to be kind to those who are suffering in this sort of way.
Yeah.
And, things might not necessarily always work out the way that we want them to. Mm-hmm. And I was just, again, I was continuously astonished by how well the show treated its material and, discussed the issues that arose in it.
Yeah.
Often by just, like, not necessarily, like, discussing them, but more showing them in a very frank manner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. Like, it definitely shows a lot of segments where it's just like, life happens, and sometimes it keeps happening, and it'll beat you into the ground. At what it feels like beating you into the ground anyway.
And sometimes, like, genuinely, when it started, it was not even your fault. Like, it just happened that way.
Yeah, and it was definitely I felt like at least it was mostly, like, realistic in some way, and I didn't like that it was realistic, because it was a lot. But, I mean, but the way it portrayed it was really, really accurate, and I don't know, I have a lot of, I hold the show in pretty high regards just for that alone.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where I'm like, I mean, I went into the show thinking, like, I mean, I'm sure the show's going to be good, but, I mean, surely it can't be the, pinnacle of, everything that people put it up to be. And
the hype leading up was I think, kind of, it kind of made me think less, especially whenever, because this is a slow burn of a show. It works its way up to some of its, like, more higher moments. Because like the first 10 episodes, almost nothing of value necessarily happens, besides the fact that we've been introduced to some characters, and then they get into some hijinks.
Well, I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying too about the dread thing, is that, like, I think it did a good job establishing the mentality that you're supposed to have, like, when you go into this show.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Giving you this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it feeds you that unease, like, piecemeal at a time, and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah, and you don't really feel it. Kind of creeps up on you. Like, you don't really feel it, like, as you watch each episode, but slowly over time you start not realizing, but understanding, like, the severity of the situation, and then that's when you're like, oh shit, like, this is bad.
And considering those different aspects, I was saying I was not really sure it was going to live up to that kind of, hype it did. And Matt, you were saying you hold it in really high regard for some of those reasons. But, like, by the time I came out of this, I was like, I see why people consider this to be a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like, I've come out of this show putting it pretty solidly in my top 10. Like, I was genuinely impressed with it, because, like, for that sense of unease, that building dread, and like you said, Kyle, those first 10 episodes, not a whole lot of, like, quote-unquote consequence happens, but Matt, kind of as you say, it builds that sense of the mentality of the characters, and specifically how they interact with the world. And the fact that, like, nothing major really happens, we just kind of see them hitting walls again, and walls and walls and walls for 10 fucking episodes until we have a major moment, is just, I feel like, so emblematic of the show in and of itself, and of, you know, the kind of story it's trying to portray. How, you know, it's not going to be this huge fantastical thing. It's just that, again, when you are in that kind of state, you're just going to hit walls, and goddamn, it does a good job of showing that.
Yeah, you just keep getting stuck until eventually something breaks.
Yeah. And it's not like ReZero, where you can keep hitting your head against the wall and come out all ginky and, you know, with a whole new, you know, outlook on life and shit. Like, This is a one-shot sort of thing. So it's a whole different kind of suffering.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that, especially with some of the, like, I hate to call it highlights. I'm gonna put highlights in quotation marks because it's not really, like, maybe climaxes is a better word, but also not correct. I don't know, but there's a lot of points in this series where things break, as Kyle described it, and, like, there's a lot to digest.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they kind of rip the Band-Aid off pretty quick, because the first major climax is the off meeting. And so, like, you're like, oh, a group of suicide people. Oh no.
Yeah, like that's the first thing you encounter, and I think at that point in the show, I was like, oh god, like, if this is halfway through the show, what's the rest gonna be like?
Right.
And I had no idea, and that terrified me.
Yeah. But somehow, oh god,
I was just gonna say, yeah, it just it definitely unfortunately fulfilled those expectations later, but yeah.
I mean, the fact that they then go from, you know, Suicide Pact Island to, not a couple episodes later, getting pulled into the whole Mouse Road pyramid scheme arc, and seeing not just how it pulls Sato into this, you know, den of misery, but seeing how it stretches out to so many other people was just also like, oh my fucking god, can you give us room to breathe? Please. Like, slow down. Come on. And it feels like they immediately went there, but I know there was a good chunk of time in between those major arcs, but it still was...
Yeah, because they had the whole MMO thing where he tries to get money quick off of playing an MMO for like a few episodes before we got into the pyramid stuff.
Yeah, because he tries doing real world trading through it. And I'm like, dude, if you're not a RuneScape gold farming bot, you're out of luck, dude.
Well, it's like I looked at when this was made, and then I remember I was like, oh yeah, all the people in the like in high school were talking about like WoW, just like doing all of that shit. Or like people would rent out their character and somebody would power level it for them for money, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that tracks.
Ah, the good old days.
Yeah, there's, I think maybe good should be in quotes, but
also in quotes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff that happened in this show, but honestly, I think, oh my gosh, like, I'm sitting here and I'm just reflecting on the show, and it's horrible. But like, I'm just thinking of like all the hardships that these characters went through, and it's a lot to
I do have a couple of gripes though, because like, for instance, like, honestly, I felt like it was kind of bad that we literally learned basically everything about Misaki at the end of the show. Like, we get a hint towards it after the suicide episodes, and then that's it. And then, like, oh, so this character that's been around since the first episode, we're only now learning about them episode 23.
I don't really agree with that. I felt like, I mean, I had always gotten vibes in the earlier series. Like, sure, we didn't get all the information till the end, but I mean, there was a lot of hints.
But we also didn't get like any characterization really, because we just didn't know enough about her, and nobody in the cast asked about her. She even on several occasions is like, "Do you want to ask me about it?" do you want to talk to me about it? And they were like, no.
Well, okay, and I understand your perspective. I'm also going to have to push back against that, though, because I feel like so much of Misaki's characterization comes from seeing how she interacts with, everyone around her. I mean, like, if we were wanting to talk about, again, the halfway point of the show, where, they finally get everyone to kind of step off the ledge, literally, on, Suicide Pact Island. There's that whole scene where, they're calling everyone down and saying, look, you're fine. You have a life to live. You have family that loves you and cares for you and all this jazz. And through all that, Misaki finally gets the megaphone and she calls out Sato and is like, you cannot die. You are the one person in the world that's more useless and more abhorrent and more fucking awful than I am. And such a lowly piece of trash, and you're less than a dog. And, like, my jaw hit the floor because I know in some way moment. It's supposed to.
I think that was a good deal of characterization right there.
That's what I'm saying, because in that one moment you get to see this whole thing of like, oh my god, what happened to you, girl? Like, what got you to a point where you are so fixated on this idea? And even before that, not even that point, we get shades of that throughout the first half of the show, because there's so much where she is, again, fixated on Sato and fixated on fixing him and helping him and, trying to get him out of this. And you can see, like, when they're doing the lectures and such, she's reading stuff about, like, Jung and Freud and a bunch of other stuff that she clearly doesn't really know. Like, she kind of haphazardly slapped this shit together. And so it's clear that, to me as a viewer, I'm like, oh God, well, she is trying in every way to convince herself that she is, resourceful and useful, and that she is someone that can be someone to Sato as a person. And even though that's never once said up until the midpoint, like, it was pretty clear to me to see, oh my god, the writing is all over the fucking walls. They may as well just exploded a whole can of paint on there.
I mean, yes, but then it's like the tiniest of tidbits compared to most of the other characters, and then it's only until episode 14 when she finally picks up the megaphone and you're like, oh, we get a little bit more. So I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way, because she is the second most important character in this story and we barely know anything about her for most of the episodes.
She is, and again, but I would argue that is still part of her actual characterization and part of the story, because so much of this is like Misaki is trying to define herself not by who she is, but how she is in relation to everyone else around her. Because she doesn't want to focus on herself. She doesn't want to reveal stuff about herself. The fact of the matter is, she does not like herself as a person, and she's latching on to Sato in some attempt to make herself feel like she's a good person and to make herself feel like she can look at herself. So it only makes sense that she wouldn't really reveal anything about herself to him up until that point. She has literally nothing to gain from talking to Sato and opening up to him and saying, oh yeah, I had an abusive household situation, and my mom killed herself, and this, that, and the other. Like, she literally has nothing to gain up until the end from acknowledging those things, because thinking about them and acknowledging them is part of what pushes herself in the end to actually go for a suicide attempt. Like, not acknowledging these things is, I would say, part of her characterization, and not knowing these things and just picking these things up is pretty emblematic of Misaki as a character. That's just my thought anyway.
Okay, yeah, no, I can see that now. Yeah. The only other gripe is a personal gripe. And I just fucking hate Yamazaki as a character. He is the worst shitbag ever written. The fact that you have a guy that for some reason this story is just like, oh, isn't it so sad that he left? And I'm like, literally the last scene with him was him trying to embarrass a girl so he can get his rocks off. Like, what the fuck? He's a horrible human being. And unlike many of the other characters, his only mental illness is that he's a narcissist. He's very much about himself.
Let's see. I wrote here, this is about episode 13. I don't really know, but I wrote that he was toxic as fuck. I think
Yeah,
that's the wording I used.
He is the epitome of abusive friendship. Like that's what he is.
Now, I'm not going to like I'm not going to support anything that he's said, since he said a lot of bad shit. But sometimes
he also screamed at somebody for being worthless after they just attempted suicide the day before.
Yeah, and none of that's good, but also I do think that occasionally some truth, like when he was talking with Sato specifically, like I don't think that maybe the way he said it was right, but occasionally I felt like there was a silver lining of like truth somewhere in his statements.
Well, but that's kind of the reason why his character exists in this story, is that to be in abusive friendship, you have to feel like, but we're still friends. And so I think that that's kind of the reason why his character exists in the story, and I see exactly what that is there and why he is in this story. And I'm saying that's good. I fucking hate him.
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't like him as a character, but
there were multiple times I had to like pause and just go ooh, and then like get back into it because I just got fucking mad at him. I was so pissed.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of bad shit about Yamazaki, and like I'm not going to sit here and condone him and his actions. Yeah. I think to say just outright that he is a completely out and out toxic person is maybe a little, painting him with too wide a brush.
He went to go save his friend because he found out that they were going to commit suicide. That's about the only good thing he ever did for Sato. Besides the fact to be like, hey, do you want to work on a game project? But I'm going to abuse you the entire time we're working together.
You have to also understand, though, that Sato was also not always a good person back to him, too. We are kind of overlooking the fact that Sato is also a good person
in the show. Everyone has various shades of gray or black. Like that's
right. So I don't see why we're putting quite as much like on Yamazaki as opposed to Sato.
Like
as
I
well,
said,
when he arguably was just as shitty.
It's a personal thing, or it's just the way that Yamazaki is. Just hit me in all the wrong ways.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I understand why he does and says a lot of things that he does, especially, like, once we get the backstory that essentially his life was literally planned out to a T for him. And I think that part of why Yamazaki is so, like, incensed about him, like, I cannot believe you're doing anything, is because, like, Sato has the freedom to do whatever the fuck he wants. Like, he doesn't have the familial expectations set on him. And, I mean, his parents are literally paying him an allowance for him to fucking do nothing in Tokyo for 4 fucking years. Right. So, for someone like Yamazaki, who has these expectations set on him, and who has to do this thing, ultimately, that he doesn't want to do, I can understand why he might be mad about it. Do I condone the way he went about it? Fuck no. Right, but, like, exactly. Do I understand it? Yeah, for fucking sure.
Yeah.
Like, I get it, and I thought that made him such an interesting, compelling character.
I thought that made interesting, compelling character dynamics between everybody, and I thought that he was an interesting character in that way. My mind was just personally skewed. But yes, no, I agree with you that it's, like, his presence in the story is like latchkey. Very much like some of the other characters, where they just fit together in this really great, really fucked up story about a bunch of people. I really got that, and I think that that's how you can do a character that normally I would fucking hate, but that's the point. They're written in the show in the way that they are for that specific reason.
Yeah, and like no one is completely like black and white in this show. Like everyone is in some weird moral shade of gray, or just straight up like pure black at that point. And it's like I love that part about it, just because everyone is so fucking messy. And seeing how they actually try to live, period, is just breathtaking at times.
Yeah, like, I think a great example of that is, like, when we initially get introduced to Megami as an adult, we see her and we're like, oh, okay, she's like trying to do something with life, and she's being like really sweet and nice towards Sato, and you're like, okay. And then you find out, oh, it's because she's trying to recruit him for a pyramid scheme. And you're like, oh. And then you're like, well, she's a piece of shit. And then suddenly you find out it's because her brother is a hikikomori as well, and like she has to pay for everything herself, and everything's going to shit, and she's stuck inside this scheme. So she's like just desperately trying to do something to like survive. You're like,
yep.
Okay, there's a little bit of the empathy back.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
This show has a lot of give and take moments like that.
Yeah. Where I'm just like, oh, a good guy. Oh, I fucking hate you.
But that's also what makes the show really interesting, is that like it makes you like, I guess, like they're just, you know, trying to get by as people trying to deal with their own issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what the world is.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it makes it so that you actually really have to put some work into watching this show. And into trying to like really and truly understand these characters, because they are complex people, not necessarily just some like weird cut out of different tropes and stereotypes and shit. Like, there are some elements of that within their characters, but God Almighty, like, you know, much like an onion, there are many layers to them, and it's a nightmare to peel back each one. You will cry through a lot of those layers. Also, like an onion.
Especially whenever you're dealing with mental illness, I think it's very good to have these multifaceted characters and actually give them like empathy and understanding, but also understand, like, you know, that they can potentially harm people as well. Like, this is so much better than, like, God forbid, the Son of Death in what's that show with the school of all the Reapers?
With all the Reapers?
Not Reapers. It's like half the kids are weapons, the other half are
Soul Eater.
Yeah, Soul Eater. Like, where like Death's son, his entire thing for most of the episodes that I saw was just, I have OCD, and it's like, okay, that's not really great. I don't know why. I don't know why it's like, haha, quirky, isn't it? And it's like, no, that's actually bad. I don't know why you're doing that.
Lord. But
yeah, that's damn. Welcome to the N.H.K has fucked me up.
Yeah, like it very much does not. It in no way fetishizes any kind of like anxiety or mental illness. Yeah. Like, it very much shows it as like, this is actually an issue. Please don't take it lightly. This can go very badly for a lot of people.
I think one of the pinnacles to explain like the way that this story writes, in that the solution to the matter is usually not the best solution in this story, is pretty much that ending where, you know, Sato saves Misaki from killing herself, but his solution to making her stop killing herself is to then hallucinate an enemy and jump off a ledge after it. And it's like, that was probably not plan A or plan B.
It probably was not planned, period.
Yeah, it's like, if this was a multiple choice question, you definitely didn't get it right. But but in the end, both of these characters are able to develop from that situation. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's great. That's like really cool.
Mm-hmm. I think the astonishing thing about that scene, and I think about a lot of the show in general, is, I mean, we talk about how much of a consistent train wreck this show is. It's just a consistent series of one car smashing into another in a big chain reaction. But it's astonishing how much the show is filled with a sense of hope, but also is not bullshitty about that hope. Like, because if we get to the end, you know, there is this point where Sato is, you know, kind of just talking in general to, I guess, the audience, and is saying, you know, hey, like, I'm kind of better now. Things are pretty good. You know, I'm still working. I'm hanging in there. But there might be a day where I feel like I hate myself and I can't go outside again and things are going to really fucking suck. But for the time being, I'm good. And that's enough for right now.
I thought
and I was like, that's so like touching. And again, it's one of those things that this show just does a bang up job of being very real about everything it tries to approach.
Yeah, I especially with my own mental conditions, I thought that hit me so hard, because that's something that like me and my psychologist were talking about, where it's like, yeah, this will never go away. You will always have this, which means at some point you're going to have some bad days, but inevitably you're also going to be on the rise as well. It's like, okay, thank you. That's good. And I thought that was really great for it to in the series kind of make the final pin with that statement, where it's like, no, eventually there will be something bad, but right now our characters have reached some type of hope, and it's like, that's good.
And I'm really glad it ended like that, because if it had been everyone's happy and everyone gets what they want, it would have felt so like trite and so like against the grain of the show in and of itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like whenever I was thinking back on the ending to Perfect Blue, and the fact that like it shows our character 1 year later, and they're like, okay. They even like take off the glass, their shades, and they're just like, haha, everything's fine now. And I'm like, this girl just went through one of the most traumatic things I could possibly even comprehend somebody going through. How would they be okay?
Yeah. I was actually kind of afraid that the show was going to go that direction at a certain point, but then I remembered, we still have like an episode and a half.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a lot for this show. And it turned out to be a lot. The episode and a half almost resulted in 2 suicides, so...
sure as shit.
That's all it needed. And I was like, alright, hands off the wheel.
Gosh, and that speaks to the mental illness issues in Japan, that like their solution to people constantly committing suicide off of the same point is to just put metal fencing underneath it so I have something to land on. Like, yo, what the fuck?
I had 2 heart attacks in that last episode.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I literally thought Misaki, I thought she literally was going to die.
Yeah,
the way
really
the directing of that scene of like where she like falls off the fence is like,
oh my God.
It's so perfect, because I literally had thought for a split second that it happened, and then it didn't, and I was like, oh my God.
And that speaks to like the beautiful writing of the show, because even at that point, there's still that thought like, oh fuck, she could actually die, and that wouldn't feel off for this show.
Yeah, the show had gotten, and this is what I was talking about, it gets you in that mental zone where it puts you in the exact mental zone that you need for this show, even though that mental zone is horrible.
Where you're thinking like, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, no, that can totally happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I remember I had heard ages ago, like, I remember a couple of folks saying, like, yeah, the end's really a bummer. And I mean, like, now I don't think that's really the case. I think it's the best ending they could have got. But I remember going into that episode and hearing, like, again, the ending's a bummer. And I was like, oh no, is this why it's a bummer? Oh my fucking God, no, please, no.
I mean, I think I like a dramatic, sad ending as much as a lot of people do. I'm sure, like, because it's interesting when I think shows actually go a not positive route with their ending.
Yeah.
This show didn't need to do that. It didn't need to do that at all.
No.
It would have defeated the whole purpose.
Yeah.
I would not have been able to take a bad ending to this show.
So, I'm just glad that the show ended on that slight hope that Kyle was talking about. Or maybe it was you. I don't remember. But someone said
don't miscredit. Zach was the one that brought it up.
I didn't remember.
Who cares? It don't matter. The show had a nice little mwah of hope at the end there. even for like the rest of our supporting cast too. I mean, like nobody got exactly what they wanted. I mean, Yamazaki didn't get to, continue doing his game design dream, and he had to give up what he wanted to do to take on the family business. But even through that, he was still able to find some sense of happiness and hope in this new life. And
right, and and Hitomi was able to like give birth to a child, and she's just so happy about that. She feels like she has a purpose in life after coming back from that suicide attempt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, like even Kobayashi, her brother, after being alone in the house and not being fed for 3 days, finally hit the breaking point of like, well, I guess I have to work now for food. Yeah. And, he fucked off and ostensibly never went back to her. She was like, am I going to go back to college now, I guess? Yeah. Now that Mouse Road has also been, caught for fraud and I don't have any debts to pay to the company anymore.
Gosh, if only every pyramid scheme would be caught for fraud.
Kyle, are you caught in one that we don't know about? Do you need help?
No, but I actually have known people over the years, so...
I was actually half afraid that Kyle was going to start shelling a product right there.
That's why I want to supply blue.
Well, actually, guys, it's our first sponsor for the Backloggers. Virility enhancing jock straps. Hey.
No.
Gosh, no.
Yes, correct.
No.
Not a sponsorship we're taking. Hard pass.
Yeah, great show. I'm so glad that we finally got around to watching this, especially since it's been on my watch list for, I don't know, at least like 20 years.
I'm not sure if I ever would have watched this show without
you. Oh, Kyle, you wanted to watch this show since you were 7 years old?
Yeah.
I see. Before it even came out, you just had a premonition.
But like legit, like it's been something that everybody's like, no, you need to watch this since fucking high school for me. Yeah. So it's like, good gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have watched it without having it being on the list. I mean, I would have eventually. I've always heard a lot about it, but, it's the backlog.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, sometimes you just need that little push to get started on it, and it's a lot easier to do that if, you're being held to it. Even if it's something you're doing for fun. Like, we do this for fun, but it's like... I don't watch anime for a job. Like, it's not my 9 to 5. But sometimes I'm like, ugh, I don't want to watch that. I mean, I don't want to do
especially in a show like this, like where it's gonna get dark, and it's just like, why would you want to subject yourself to that? Like,
exactly.
So
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do find it funny that, like, the only thing that I initially knew about this show was actually a bit of humor that somebody did, because it was the AMV Hell movies that they came out with forever ago, with the Robot Chicken-esque skits.
Oh, that tracks that this would have been in that, because, I mean, like, again, this is 2006. This is peak time for that shit.
Yeah. And all it was just a short little snippet where it's just him laying on the floor, and it's like, I was going to clean my room. But then I got high.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I was like,
"Wow, man, I am."
That hits different now.
Yes, that hits way different.
God almighty! Can you imagine, like, having watched this back in 2006 as it was like airing? Can you imagine having to go a week at a time to see another episode of this?
No,
I would have lost my fucking mind.
Yeah.
I would have been keeping up with the show for half a year, trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with them.
I'm just imagining, like, people writing their fan theories on whatever forum board was popular at the time.
Yeah, if we were doing 4D chess, I can only imagine what forums were doing at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man.
We are very lucky that we got to experience it like this and condense all of that worry and shit into some small packages.
Yeah, and especially in the year of our Lord 2020.
What a fucking time to watch a show about a guy that doesn't leave his fucking house and is going nuts about it. What could possibly go wrong in quarantine 2020?
I couldn't stop thinking about that myself. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh. This may not have been the best time to pick watching this show.
The bottom low while you're watching this show is if you're like looking at like Misaki or something, you're like, lucky bastard actually manages to go out in the snow.
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
That's when you're like, oh no, maybe I should give this a break for a few days.
Yeah. I mean, I did. Yeah. I didn't think that exact thought, but I did have to give it a break for a few days.
Yeah, you were smarter than me. I marathoned it over the course of several days leading up to today. So like, I just kind of spread that all out, but still all at the same time.
I made a plan to watch just a little bit, same amount each day, so I could, finish it and then have a couple days before the cast where I could just kind of just sit with it.
Decompress.
So I wouldn't have to, because God, I needed it. But yeah, this is a show that I cannot imagine watching all of it in like 1 or 2 sittings. I'd lose my fucking mind.
Fuck that. No. don't
I
ever
couldn't
do
it.
I watched most of the episodes over like 4 days. Like,
oh gosh.
Several weeks ago. Because I was afraid, honestly, of what the show was going to do. So I did that.
I feel you.
And that was not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason why I was like, hey guys, you might want to start watching the show. Like now.
Yep.
Because we may have to delay the podcast for another month.
Yeah.
Oy, oy. But hey, we did it. We have a new piece of history under our belts.
Yeah.
Like, look at us making progress, boys. Who would have thought we would have got here?
And it is a great show. I don't know if I'm going to recommend it for everybody. But
I would.
No, like it's amazing. It's a great show. But like if you're feeling down, don't watch something else.
Yeah. Maybe not necessarily the best for all folks all the time, but I would 100% recommend it for anyone who likes anime.
Welcome to the N.H.K, one of the greatest shows ever watched. Please consult your therapist before watching.
Yeah, I don't know when I would watch this again. It would be a while, but I definitely see myself revisiting it at some point in time.
I do too, actually. Now that like I know how the story plays out, I want to go back and see all of the pieces. Like we said, all those red flags like fitting into the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Also, I heard that the manga and the novel actually hit differently. So
I noticed a little bit of that because while we were waiting to get the podcast started, I was looking up just some facts about different characters, and it was like in the manga this, in the anime this, and I'm like, wow, okay, interesting.
Yeah. Oh, a little different flavor.
Yeah, apparently the manga, the novel, and the anime have like all different like traits to them that feed into like the same like overall feeling of the story, but they're all a little bit different on the same topic.
Fucking dig that. I'll have to look into that then.
Yeah, I'll have to read the manga sometime. Not now.
Huh. Yes,
not now.
You just got out of it. Give yourself some space.
You can't put me back in, man. I'm free.
Get back in.
Yeah, I think with that, I think I'm going to excuse myself from this cast. I'm good. I don't want to do this anymore, I think.
Yeah.
I'm going to go grab a beer.
I have spoken about N.H.K, and that's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
That's it. Matt said it. That's it. It's over.
Spoken.
No one can say anything else. It's gone. It's done.
Why do you always do this? This is like the second time.
I'm literally not going to say anything else.
Okay. Well, see you next time. Thanks
Bye.
for watching.
Thanks for listening. As always, you can find all our podcast, articles, videos, etc. at thebacklogers.com. Our intro-outro song is The Bear by A Shell in the Pit, who you can find on Spotify as well as Bandcamp. And we'd love to hear from you all either in the comments on our site or any feedback you want to leave us on whatever podcast platform you like. iTunes, SoundCloud, or a recommended list from your therapist. Please take care of your mental health. And as always, we're on Twitter at _Backloggers. So pull up a sit and log and stop by for a bit. See you later.